welcome to my patch walkthrough for Staggering. If you're interested in checking out the actual performance of this, live performance of it, there's a link in the description. This one is going to be walking through my thought process and how I made this all happen. So let's take some of these things out. Starting with the most important thing, inspiration for it all, which came from the Bard Quartet. So this is a quantizer, but what I was interested in using it for was, instead of it being all about quantizing notes, which it is doing, but it's the main thing that inspired me was to use it to find interesting rhythms. So what's happening now here in channel 1, it is only being sent a sawtooth wave from the pressure track of my Minibrute here. And I used that particular sawtooth LFO so I could be in exact control of the amplitude of it in a more precise way. So let me unplug this harmony unit here with a harmony input. So as that sawtooth is going through, it is going through these notes evenly, and that's what's actually giving our trigger outs that are being then sent to my Minibrute, starting the sound. And then each of these twists on the harmony knob gives us a different rhythm. So I've got like triplets here, and I've got like eighth notes here, or right here rather. So those first three steps are the main ones of 16th notes. Triplets, and eighth notes. But then on the other ones, let me just show you how it works. So on this last one here on 8, I just have one note left, so it's kind of my chord notes. But if I add in other things there, you can see all the way to the point where if I have this, it just ends up being really crazy trigger-wise. But if I spread them out, with some really interesting rhythms here. So on each of these tracks here, I have a different interesting rhythm happening. And you'll notice I'm not taking the output of that one at all. I'm just letting that track quantize the rhythm. And the other interesting thing here is what I'm doing here with this harmony input. So you see now I'm getting random changes of what the rhythm's going to be. And that's coming from LFO2 down here, which is sequenced with the clock and on stepped random voltages. But what I'm doing is I'm sending it into maths, multing it, sending it into both channel 2 and 3 of maths. 2 is turned up just a little bit, and then 3 is turned down quite a bit. So if and then I'm taking the OR output, which only allows the positive ones, into that harmony spot. So if I turn this one here back to 0, whenever we have negative voltage on the LFO, it's just the OR output's just gonna give us 0. And then this channel 2 here is set to just give us our triplets, our 16th notes, and occasionally our 8th notes. But then as I turn down this one, whenever our LFO is going negative, this will flip it and now send it back to positive. And I can have it be still just a little bit, so I've got my 16th notes, triplets, and 8th notes still. Or I can send it a bit further and push it into some of those later, crazier harmonies on steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. And what that does is it lets me control, kind of have a little bit more control over what rhythms happen. So whenever the LFO is positive, I end up with just those main 3 triplets, 16th notes, or 8th notes. Whenever the LFO is negative, then I get some more craziness of the rhythm. And And so I've got more of an emphasis on those main 3 rhythms as we go into it. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting, that I'm not sure why it turns out this way, but if I hop over here to Harmony 8 here, just so I mess around with things, I figured that if I did the whole tone scale, it would sound even. And now at this point with this speed that I'm at, you can't really necessarily tell, but it doesn't end up as even as I expected it to be. So I had to do a little bit of trial and error to find out what rhythms worked and what ones were a little wonky, even if I expected them to work nicely because the notes are evenly spread across the octave. But anyway. So that's where we've got that, and I can change how often those rhythms change by shifting this up or slowing it down. And that's my main thing right there. So the Bard Quartet, the track 1 here is controlling my rhythms, not anything out of the output, but just worrying about the triggers. And then track 2 has the same scale across all the harmonies. And that's where actually my melody is coming in. So let's move on. That main melody is coming from, every time that this trigger is happening, it's not only triggering my ADSR and AD of my Minibrute, where the sound is coming from, but it's also kicking us to the next step of the variegating. When this channel 1 of that is actually being sent into channel 2 here to actually give us our pitches of there. And those are being locked into this C minor-ish scale as we go into that. So all of the 8 harmony steps for 2 look the same. It's just the rhythms change on channel 1 there. So that's the main voice there. Just some FM on these guys. Oscillator 2 at the same pitch as these guys, and the rhythm being controlled by the Bard Quartet, and the melody being sequenced by the variegate sent through the Bard as well. So other things that are happening is we've got the Mavis on a drone. And for this guy, I have the LFO getting a new sample and hold for its rate every time, being sent into the pulse width modulation. But also the LFO is also being mixed together right here with the main VCO and sent into the fold, so that as the LFO is high, it kind of pushes the main VCO into the fold. So this isn't audio rate, but I'm still mixing them together and sending it into the fold just so that LFO can push it into the fold a little bit. The other interesting thing happening though with the Mavis here is that I have it ducking when using the cutoff, ducking whenever the envelope hits. So the envelope is pretty negative here, so it takes the cutoff down. And that gate then is patched into the gate from my bass drum down here. So my bass drum, so this Mavis is ducking with that, with the cutoff being turned down, and I can control the amount of that with this release, either barely at all or having it coming a long time to get back in. So a neat way to kind of get a little bit of ducking happening there, pretty naturally. The other thing that you'll notice is I was using the keyboard here to not only change the notes of my Mavis, but that keyboard is also being sent over here to the transpose function of my main voice. So on channel 2, I have the transpose from here going into the keyboard stuff sent over there. Sometimes set on post so that I can do cool things like just have a G minor chord. Sometimes changing all the channels by holding 2 and then pushing pre. And now I have this pre-quantizer, so I can do cool things like have this A flat major chord. With that that mid go as well, along with that. So the bass drum, as I talked about, was set up here with the velocity track, just regular old gates. Those gates being sent up into plats, with both the outputs going to different spots on my mixer here. So just regular old bass drum mode plats. And then finally, the last thing I have going is my noise percussion. So white noise from the Minibrute, sent up into the high pass spot of Three Sisters, with the output of that being sent into my mixer, VCA'd by Maths Channel 1. So I've got my LFO 1, which is sequential square waves, sent into Maths Channel 1 here. And then when I turn up Channel 1, I get my white noise percussion. And but then what I have is Channel 3 of my Varigate is set on some CV that's kind of just pretty random. Random changes and a random order to the sequence as well. So, and that is being multed and sent to the fall time of Maths, as well as in the FM of the Three Sisters. So that if I get a high signal from 3, I end up with a short sound from Channel 1 being the VCA, but it's going to be a higher sound because this is turned down. And then if I get a lower signal from here, this is going to be longer, but lower. I'm giving all of my white noise percussion there. So there you go. If you have any questions, let me know, or if you're inspired by something to find out on your own, go for it. And yeah, so again, this is all inspired by thinking about having this quantizer instead of this quantizer being about melody, having it be about rhythm. By sending in a sawtooth wave in there and letting its trigger out be the thing that guides everything else. If I did listen to Channel 1, it would sound like this. It might give you a better picture of how that works. You can hear it's always descending as it goes through those, and what ones I have chosen determine that rate, the rhythm as it goes through those. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed, and happy patching.